Let us pray. Almighty God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. We come before you this day as we pray for our nation and our elected leaders gathered in this place. Remember those who assist their work as they deal with the issues affecting the people. You have guided us through national and personal challenges in the past. Be with us today. You have blessed our people in so many ways. Therefore, fill us all with the knowledge of your holy word, as it states, that to whom much is given, much more is required. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. I say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Let us remain standing and pay respects to Mr. Reynold Kelman, former clerk of his Honourable Chairman. Shall remain standing for 1 minute. This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 3rd of June 2026 will be deferred. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour. Messages from His Excellency the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notice of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Human Tissue Transplant Bill 2026.
The question is that this bill be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and obituary speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Oral replies to questions. Notice of motions for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. Government's business is the order of the day.
Order number 6, sir. Order number 6, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Labour, Social Security and the Third Sector, to move the second reading of the Protection of Wages Bill 2026.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've taken note of the words of our chaplain and maybe the instruction of our chaplain when he shared earlier that to whom much is given, much is expected. And Mr. Speaker, much has been given to this Barbados Labour Party in government as it relates to the development of our people, the protection of our people, the development of our country, and ensuring that the development of our country is human-centered, that it has at its core the recognition of the essential humanity of every individual, the essential humanity of every worker in this country. And so this morning, I am exceedingly happy to be able to lead the debate on another piece of legislation, a bill that seeks to amplify our commitment to protection and production. Protection of those people on whose backs, on whose shoulders, the development of our country rests, so that, given that protection, those people, those individuals, those human beings are able to produce for themselves, produce for their dependents, ultimately to produce for their nation, to produce for our nation. The bill before us this morning, the Protection of Wages Bill, causes me to think about and to reflect on that lady who worked at a gas station in St. Michael. I know it is against the standing orders to quote from the newspaper, but it is not against the standing
You
orders.
are quite aware of that, though.
Quite aware.
So you would not breach it, would you?
I will not breach
Or you would
that
ask
standing
permission
order.
to say something?
The standing order does not prohibit me from holding up any piece of
That I understand.
And there is published some time ago a newspaper article, which I will not quote from, but which essentially said that a certain lady was paid $249, her final payment, in all coins. And this bill causes me to reflect on her, the trauma that came from the obvious bad behavior, and I'm going to refrain from using words like nasty today, but the obvious bad behavior of that employer at that petrol station. This bill causes me to reflect on what was meted out to her. I'll use this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to remind petrol station workers that this Barbados Labour Party government has always had them in sight. We have been listening to them for many years. We've been feeling them, we've been hearing them, we've been understanding them. And so when I tell you that this bill causes me to reflect on her, I'm also sharing with petrol station workers in this country that it was this Barbados Labour Party in government a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, that enacted regulations governing safety and health for workers in petrol stations. And I remind this honorable chamber, and I remind petrol station workers across this country that they are entitled to a full medical annually at no cost to themselves. We as a government that is human-centered, a government that is focused on protecting our workers, recognize that those of us who go into petrol stations, you spend 5 minutes and some people leave with a giddy head because of the fumes that they've been inhaling. We have put in place a regulation that calls for workers in that setting to be provided with annual medicals, including blood work, at no cost to themselves. And I encourage all petrol station workers to ensure that they realize the benefit that we have put into a regulation on the Safety and Health at Work Act. I will also say to petrol station workers, even as I reflect on the lady who was paid $249 in coins, that the same regulation allows for them, as a matter of fact, requires that they be provided with rain protection. Rain protection if the pumps are in a place that is separated from the forecourt, or the forecourt from the office where they need to take the money, so that in times when there is rain, they can move from forecourt to that place where they take the money without getting wet. That is what this Barbados Labour Party has done, as it recognizes that workers in petrol stations are human beings. They're workers too. They're not just fuel station attendants. They're not just gas station workers. They are human beings, and they need to be protected by the state. Mr. Speaker, this bill, Protection of Wages Bill, also causes me to reflect on those persons who have worked long and hard for businesses and who have seen those businesses fold up, become insolvent, become bankrupt, and workers are left to some degree holding the bag. All the other creditors step in, get what they can, and leave the carcass, so to speak. Little net skin to nothing is what the older people in Rosehill used to say. Net skin to nothing left for the workers of those businesses after those workers have put their sweat and their toil into building those businesses. This bill, Mr. Speaker, also causes me to reflect on those situations where relatives, or sometimes couples, partners, come together, work out among themselves how they are going to handle their finances, who is going to pay for what is going to come out of each person's pay. And there have been times when, after making those decisions, the employer says that the law does not allow me to assign any more than 1/3 of your pay to go toward any particular expense. This bill causes me to reflect on those people who have not been able to advance materially as expected to because of that limitation. This bill, Mr. Speaker, also causes me to reflect on those workers who look at their pay slip and see a word called retention. Mr. Speaker, I had cause last Wednesday afternoon into the evening after inspecting the unhealthy accommodation, and note that I indicated earlier that I'm going to be tempered in my language today because this is an important bill, and I don't want to get lost with overly dramatic language or other expressions. So I'll just say unhealthy surroundings, and after examining a pay slip with the word retention on it, I had cause to say to the representatives of that company that what the company was in effect doing was attempting to transfer business risk from the business to the worker. I felt, Mr. Speaker, maybe after having managed businesses in the past, that I was giving some kind of lesson to people who were in business and who should have known better. And I believe that they probably know better, but are just being unkind. I find it a little bit difficult, Mr. Speaker. I think nasty is a better word in their approach to managing their people and their business. Now, a business is set up with the understanding that there are certain risks to a business. So I'll give an example. A bank is in the business of lending money, earning interest, and making a profit out of the interest after other expenses have been deducted. When a person or a business, I should say when an individual or a business goes to the bank, the calculation of the interest rate is based on an assessment of the risk. How risky are you? And that is what caused me, Mr. Speaker, to be really amused when back before we were in office, when the Democratic Labour Party was in office, a friend of the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, someone he likes to speak about pretty often, a friend of the Honourable Member for St. Thomas indicated, well, you can hear when he speaks why I say what I said. A certain former Prime Minister indicated that the increased risk that Barbados was facing had nothing to do with anybody. And I was so offended at that because the country's risk, the risk profile of the country, impacts the interest rate that is charged to individuals. But all that is to say that risk is a business concern. The risk that the business faces is not to be passed on to individual workers. Business risk is priced into what you charge for the product that is generated by the workers. And so, as I read and as I contemplate this bill, the matter of employers deducting retention comes to mind, and those workers who suffer the indignity of being forced to share in business risk when they should not be sharing in business risk. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've indicated what reflecting on this bill causes me to focus on. I have, though, to contextualize this bill. This bill, Mr. Speaker, the Protection of Wages Bill, comes to this chamber on the centenary, on the 100th anniversary of the first attempt in Barbados to formally organize workers in this country. This bill, Mr. Speaker, comes as we celebrate the centenary of the formation of the Working Men's Association by then Dr. O'Neill, now the Right Excellent Charles Duncan O'Neill. He formed the Working Men's Association 100 years ago. He was inspired by Garvey, so he was in essence a Garveyite. He understood the plight of workers. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, during a strike, he approached an employer and asked to be able to speak on behalf of workers, and was dismissively told, we're not engaging with you. We don't have any time to talk with you. But this bill comes as we celebrate that centenary. And maybe I should add, for the few who still have a difficulty with the Honourable Member for St. George North being the General Secretary of a trade union and also a Member of Parliament on the government side, I should say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to this Honourable Chamber, and to Barbados, and to those few who are still picking at stupidity, that the Working Men's Association was formed out of the Democratic League. The trade union was formed out of a political organization, which is exactly what happened when Sir Grantley Adams formed the Barbados Workers' Union out of the Barbados Progressive League, the Barbados Labour Party. That is particularly close to me, Mr. Speaker, because I exist as a Member of Parliament in the shadow of trade union leaders who were members of Parliament in this chamber, while also senior officials in the Barbados Workers' Union. And Mr. Speaker, I'm just contextualizing where we are this moment in 2026 in this country. The Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, is, as its name suggests, a Labour party. The Barbados Labour Party is at its core a party that is located with workers, grounded in the belief that workers are essential for productive development, that workers are human beings, and that their involvement in national development needs to be respected, needs to be encouraged, needs to be facilitated, and that as human beings, essentially, they need to be protected. And so when I speak to the Barbados Labour Party and locating this protection of wages bill, a 1951 piece of legislation, locating it in 2026, I am under a significant obligation to indicate that before Sir Grantley worked on this bill in 1951, there was 1937 and 1938. So I spoke to 1926 and the Working Men's Association, but in 1937, Sir Grantley Adams, who founded this party, represented a man, now national hero, the Right Excellent Clement Payne, as he led a workers' struggle to improve their lot. Sir Grantley started this Barbados Labour Party in 1938 after being the attorney representing Clement Payne, that workers' leader. I must say that in 1944, but before 44, the Barbados Workers' Union was formed in 1941 by Sir Grantley, as I said earlier. But I have to say to you that a predecessor of mine, J.T.C. Ramsey, James Starton Cullimore Ramsey, former Member of Parliament for St. Peter, was the first trustee of the Barbados Workers' Union. I am saying to you, Mr. Speaker, and to this honourable chamber, that the Barbados Labour Party is rooted and grounded in worker protection, worker advancement, worker enfranchisement. This bill intends to repeal and replace Cap 351, passed, like I said earlier, in 1951, and that was Grantley Herbert Adams, Sir Grantley Herbert Adams. This party's commitment to workers and to empowering workers, protecting workers, enfranchising workers is also seen in our next Prime Minister, Tom Adams, and his Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act of 1980. It is seen, Mr. Speaker, in another Prime Minister, the late Owen Seymour Arthur, my immediate predecessor as Member of Parliament for St. Peter. And in 2005, he shepherded through this chamber the Safety and Health at Work Act, a landmark piece of legislation aimed at protecting the safety, health, and welfare of workers in this country. I am, Mr. Speaker, indicating that this Barbados Labour Party is a Labour Party, a party of workers, a party built on enfranchising workers and locating this protection of wages bill. Our next Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, and our current Prime Minister, when we enacted the Prevention of Discrimination Bill, Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act, which it is now. Prime Minister, Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, also the Prime Minister, when we for the first time enacted national minimum wage. And Mr. Speaker, there is one Prime Minister who I have not spoken to, one Prime Minister of this Barbados Labour Party who I have not spoken to, but whose influence is what guided me as we developed this protection of wages bill. I refer to the late Sir Harold Bernard St. John. Mr. Speaker, it was Sir Harold who said many years ago to the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast that there will come a time in Barbados when those practices that we understand to be human-centered and to have a human face, that we understand to be decent and upholding the essential humanity of people generally, including workers, would not be respected. It was Sir Harold, Mr. Speaker, who indicated to us that we would have to put systems, structures, legislation in place to make sure that when those bad behaved people raised their heads, that there were structures and systems in place that would protect those long established traditions of decency, even in the world of work. And so, Mr. Speaker, what Sir Harold predicted, what he warned us about, is where we are at. We in Barbados are at that place where there are people, not everybody, and sometimes the employers indicate to me that I paint everybody with the same brush. I'm not painting everybody with the same brush. But you know, the Apostle Paul wrote something in 2 Timothy chapter 3. Also, before Sir Harold, and maybe Sir Harold had read this passage, but in those first few verses of 2 Timothy 3, Paul spoke about some people, and again, he didn't paint everybody with the same brush, but he talked about, among other things, that they would be lovers only of themselves, lovers of money, brutal, despisers of good. This is where we are in Barbados today in some situations. And so this government has determined, because of our ethos, because of all that I've outlined to you, Mr. Speaker, in contextualizing this bill, this potential piece of legislation, we have determined that we will not allow exploitation of workers in this country. And when I say exploitation of workers, I'm speaking not just to Barbadian-born, but I'm also speaking to CARICOM nationals. I'm also speaking to migrant workers. And I separated CARICOM nationals from migrant workers because in spite of what attorneys may pick at in terms of the legal terms, I see CARICOM nationals as us. And the people I represent, many of them see CARICOM nationals as us. We just got off at different ports. But they are us. So I speak to Barbadians born in Barbados, I speak to CARICOM nationals, and I speak to migrants. This Barbados Labour Party government will not allow exploitation of any kind. Exploitation in the workplace, in the workspace, exploitation in housing, exploitation in pay. We will not. We recently expanded our team of labor officers, and I'm happy to indicate that some of them are with us this morning in this chamber because some of them have put in some work in getting us to this point. And there are others who are new, who are still in their training stage and for whom we believe that this debate would be helpful. But we've also been, besides expanding our base of labor officers, also strengthening the leadership, and we are in the process of strengthening our inspection regime. Now, this bill, Mr. Speaker, follows significant work that this Barbados Labour Party government has done since we came to office at the end of May of 2018. We have had, since then, the passage of the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act. We have, beside that piece of legislation, we've also added regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act. That act was passed, no regulations were ever appended to it. We were able to establish regulations. The regulation that relates to petrol station workers is but one of those regulations. We've also passed in this chamber the Labor Clauses Concessions Act, a piece of legislation recognizing that if the people have allowed you certain latitude in establishing and operating your business, then there is a requirement that those taxpayers who have given you latitude must be treated properly. And so we've passed the Labor Clauses Concessions Act, and under that act, we have established for the first time rates of pay and conditions of work for all hotel workers, all workers in tourism accommodation. And we are thankful to the Barbados Workers Union, the organization that drove much of the work that attended the establishment of those rates of pay. We have, and also significant work from the Barbados Workers Union, established rates of pay and conditions of work for the first time under the Labor Clauses Public Contracts Act. And those rates of pay and conditions of work relate to construction companies and road building companies having contracts paid for by the taxpayers of this country. We have established that since we came to office. We have also established for the first time, as I indicated earlier, a national minimum wage, the first time in our country's history We also established a sectoral wage for security guards. We have established the Barbados Job Register. We have, based and built upon the significant work done by the Barbados Workers' Union, established a national workplace wellness policy. And you will note, Mr. Speaker, that throughout my intervention, I have been speaking from the time I started about the trade union movement. That is not accidental, it is not incidental. The Barbados Labour Party's ethos is built on the understanding that the trade union movement is absolutely critical to balanced and inclusive national development. That is why Sir Grantley, who founded this party, formed a separate body to fight on behalf of the workers. He led both at the same time, but he recognized that there needed to be an organization that was focused entirely on advancing the cause of workers. We've also, Mr. Speaker, in faithful obedience to those marching orders that were set in 1938 and 1941, established for the first time paternity leave in this country. We've also extended maternity leave in this country. We've also made it very easy, significantly easier for self-employed people to participate in our social security system, the National Insurance Scheme. Now, I've called a number of pieces of legislation, regulations, and I know, because they've said so to me, that there are some employers who believe that we've been doing too much with respect to legislation, that it may be becoming too cumbersome to work, to have business. I have a simple message for employers. If your business model does not allow you to treat your workers properly, then shut the place down. Those around in the 1830s had a very good cause to say, if we abolish this system, our businesses will not be able to continue. Mr. Speaker, the world could not allow for that system to continue just so that businesses could continue to be profitable. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that this Barbados Labour Party is not anti-business. We are well aware that there are many employers, many companies in this country that are able to prosper while their workers are also benefiting. It is not a strange concept. There are businesses, and the unfortunate thing is that many of those business leaders do not say a lot publicly. But there are many businesses in this country built on decent work, built on treating their workers properly. There are many. So this is not a new concept. It is not something that is impossible. It is not impossible for us to have those two things at the same time. We have observed, maybe I should say increasingly, that some of what we understood to be decent ways of approaching industrial relations fallen by the wayside. What Sir Harold counseled many decades ago, we see coming to pass. And, Mr. Speaker, in some cases, this disrespect for our traditional values is coming from newcomers, from what in Manakwata we refer to as comers. So that I use this opportunity to say to all those who will come, or those who have come, we expect nothing less than decent approaches to industrial relations and to occupational safety and health. I also want to say, those of us who drive, from time to time hear the police siren. Only when you are speeding, breaking the law, does a siren cause you any distress. Only when you are doing something wrong does a siren cause you any distress. And maybe I could say, as a member of parliament, for a constituency where groups gather from place to place, only if you have something in your possession that you should not have will the grey jeeps cause you to run. If you are working with the law and operating above the law, then the presence of those who are charged with enforcing the law causes no challenge. A word to the decent, a word to those that are not so decent. This bill, Mr. Speaker, the Protection of Wages Bill, is built on international labor standards. And when I say international labor standards, I need to be very clear. There are those in this country who believe that those standards or those agreements that Barbados signs up to are sometimes standards or agreements that people from governments in different places, governments in the Americas, or governments around the world, sit down in a room and cook up, and then come back to the population and say, well, we have agreed to this. The honourable member for St. Michael South knows, I heard his sound, he knows how I feel about those things. And as a matter of fact, he was probably surprised when I say that this legislation is built on international labor standards. But let me explain to him and to you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, not to him. I only go through the officer. Let me explain to him through you, Mr. Speaker, that the reason why I say that this legislation is built on international labor standards is because international labor standards are unlike any other standards or agreements across the globe. Unlike any other, simply because, and maybe simply is not the correct word, unlike any other, because international labor standards are only agreed when governments from across the world, employers from across the world, and workers from across the world get together, discuss formally for 4 weeks. But outside of those formal discussions for 4 weeks, extensive discussions over sometimes 4 years. The honourable member for St. James North knows exactly what I'm speaking about as a former ambassador in Geneva, but also as a former senior advisor in the International Labour Organization. Almost sometimes 4 years of discussion, so that when we come up with international labour standards, we are sure that they are not just words on paper cooked up by a few governments and maybe bulldozed by powerful governments and forced down the throats of smaller countries. These standards, the standards upon which this protection of wages bill is built, are standards that have been discussed and agreed by the people of the world. And so, Mr. Speaker, I refer to Convention 95. Convention 95 is a 1949 convention. In 1949, the world agreed to this standard that caused Sir Grantley, the Barbados Labour Party's leader at that time, to have a bill in the same name in 1951. Since then, we have had another labour standard that needed to be read in conjunction with Convention 95, and that was Convention 173. Convention 173 is titled Protection of Workers' Claims, and in brackets, Employers' Insolvency Convention. When I said to you, Mr. Speaker, that reflecting on this bill causes me to think about those who work in businesses that have gone bankrupt, it is on the basis that some years ago, and this convention, 173, is a 1992 convention, it was recognized that we needed to do something about workers whose employers have gone bankrupt. So these two international labor standards, Mr. Speaker, form much of the basis of the bill that is before us this morning, the bill that is before us today. CAT 351, the Existing Protection of Wages the Existing Protection of Wages Act, is, as I said, a 1951 piece of legislation. The records are that it was last amended in 1975. Now, for people like me, 1975 does not sound like a long time. For people like my children, it sounds like the Middle Ages. 1975, Mr. Speaker, is over half a century ago. Last time this bill was amended. Mr. Speaker, I've set, I think, the context within which this bill comes to this honourable chamber. I will, at this point, speak to some of the features of this bill and I will restate some of the measures that are in the existing bill, because I believe that given that our attention is focused on protection of wages, we need to be reminded of some of those elements of the existing bill, the existing act, that have fed into the current bill and that will remain once this new bill becomes law. I will also speak to some of the new features of the bill. At Section 2, the section, Mr. Speaker, that you and other attorneys know to be the definition section, there is included at Section 2.1 in the definition of currency. It says it includes fiat, digital, and other formats. Mr. Speaker, this inclusion of digital and then the inclusion of the term other formats speaks to the contemporary nature of the bill, but also speaks to the forward-looking nature of the drafting of this piece of legislation. That is because if this bill had come, Mr. Speaker, to this honourable chamber in 2000, we may not have included digital, because at that time, it may not have been contemplated that there would be something such as digital currency. In 2026, with the rapid advancement of technology, we are not even sure what will be happening in December of this year. And so the definition for currency includes fiat, digital, and other formats. In this bill, you will also see that the bill is to be read in conjunction with the Employment Rights Act. Now, that is done because we do not want to have in this bill to duplicate clauses already found in the Employment Rights Act, and we also want to ensure consistency with our labor legislation. And as I mentioned, consistency with our labor legislation, Mr. Speaker, I have to say to this honorable chamber to remind us that in our manifesto for 2022, the election this year, in our manifesto, we included a promise that we would be moving to a labor code. That labor code is really the ultimate as it relates to consistency of legislation, consistency of definitions. We will be doing that. I take this opportunity to inform you as well, Mr. Speaker, that it is part of our Decent Work Country program 2025 to 2030, which we've signed with the International Labour Organization. That Decent Work Country program will allow us to have some resources brought to bear on ensuring that we can have that labor code become a reality. Mr. Speaker, this bill also speaks to modernizing payment methods. And so we have added to the bill under methods of payment, still in section 3, well, sorry, not still, now in section 3, we have added wire transfer and direct deposit. Now, it may amuse you, Mr. Speaker, that right now, wire transfer and direct deposit is not in the law, but there are not many people who are paid outside of those two methods of payment. The Bible says that in times of ignorance, God winked. We are making right what most people are doing wrong, but we understand why they're doing it. It speaks to the fact that legislation really has to keep up with developments. And on that score, I will say that when I went to the Ministry of Labor, we had no legal officers. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with our second legal officer. We now have 2 legal officers in our ministry. I was reflecting with the Deputy Chief Labor Officer that we've done quite a bit of legislation, and she and I and a few others have had to act as lawyers. And I was going based on what
Honourable, be careful. Be wary and be careful.
I don't want the Bar Association to cite me. I do not want to appear in the newspaper. Maybe I should have those words struck from the record. I was acting in a way that I thought an attorney would act. I was not giving any advice to anybody. I was not hanging around the Supreme Court. I was not advertising anything. We were just struggling through. But I was not either a friend of the court or there was some other thing that I saw. No, not Amicus Curiae, there was another. Yes, I was not a Mackenzie friend either. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure that there are any Mackenzies in St. Peter. So I was not a Mackenzie constituent or Mackenzie friend. But we've had to struggle through, and I think we have done relatively well while struggling through. But we have now 2 legal officers, and we expect that keeping current will become more possible than it was in the past. And so direct deposits, wire transfers added to methods of payment. Also in section 3, Mr. Speaker, is the provision that if the payment is by direct deposit, then the institution that that deposit goes to is to be determined by the worker. I have known in my political life, that there are sometimes, or have been sometimes, employers who say to workers, my account is at this bank, so if you want the money to go to, you're going to have to open an account at this bank. This legislation, or this bill when it becomes law, will indicate that if payment is to be by direct deposit, the institution will be determined by the worker. And that is at section 3, subsection 9. The bill also provides, Mr. Speaker, in the same section, that the method of payment is to be at no cost, changing the method of payment is to be at no cost to the worker. Changing the method of payment is to be at no cost to the worker. Importantly in this bill, Mr. Speaker, also at section 3, is what will become a prohibition against the nastiness that is reflected in this newspaper article about that lady, former worker of the gas station, who was supposed to have been paid $250, who indicated that she received $1 short. She indicated that she was short paid, $249 in coins. At section 3 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, 311A, payment of wages can include no more than $10 in coins. We are stopping these kind of wicked people or anybody else who, because they don't like the way the separation is happening, maybe the worker cursed them. I don't know what the situation could be. But we are stopping this kind of bad behavior, where a person in 2026 or beyond will display this kind of level of childishness, this level of immaturity in an employment relationship, as to cause a worker to be paid $249 in coins. This bill limits the amount that can be paid in coins to $10. The bill retains from the existing legislation that reasonable time must be allowed to convert wages to cash. Reasonable time, there is no stipulation. Reasonable is a term that is known to law, and so we do not believe that it needs to be further amplified. We understand that there are ATMs, we understand a whole lot of things. We also understand that there are a few who we need to protect workers against. And we contemplated this particular clause, given the proliferation of ATM machines, but we also understood that we still have workers in this country who do not trust machines and who prefer to do what I never want to do, which is to go and stand up in a line. I know that because, Mr. Speaker, I went to a picnic held by one of the churches in my constituency, and two ladies, I smiled because it was kind of a little bit strange when I heard it. Two ladies told me, Mr. Jordan, you all have to get the banks to bring back bank books. These ladies were serious. They told me that I needed to tell my colleagues that we have to get the banks to bring back bank books. Now, I use that illustration only to say that I know, and everybody who represents people know of other people, of constituents, who are fearful still of machines and who would prefer to go into the institution. So that while this clause is not meant to be harping back to the past, it is not meant to keep us stuck in the past. It is simply meant as a recognition that the people who we are elected to serve, the people who I am elected to serve, some of them still want to go in to the banking institution. And so reasonable time must be given to them in order to convert their wages to cash. Another forward-thinking component of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is the matter of foreign currency. In the existing legislation, a worker cannot be paid except in Barbados dollars. Now, we are a country, and I am happy to say that as a party in government, it was the Barbados Labour Party who drove the development of what we then call the international business sector. We drove that development, and the country benefited significantly from that international business sector, or what was then styled the international business sector. But we had a situation, and still have a situation, where it is not legal for a worker in Barbados to be paid in a foreign currency in Barbados. And so this bill includes a provision, and this provision falls under the foreign currency legislation. It is at section 4 of the bill, and in that section, Mr. Speaker, you will see some reference to a piece of legislation called the Foreign Currency Permits Act 2025. The clause in this bill allows for a worker to be paid in a foreign currency under certain circumstances, and those circumstances must fall within the ambit of this Foreign Currency Permits Act. So to put it in layman's terms, if the company has a foreign exchange account registered in Barbados, and the worker also has a foreign exchange account with an authorized dealer, and I think authorized dealer is the word that is used in the legislation, then that worker can be paid in a foreign currency. As a matter of fact, if I may share the clause at 4.2, wages paid to an employee in accordance with subsection 1 shall be paid into a foreign currency deposit account held at an authorized dealer. And so we have made it possible for persons working with businesses that deal with foreign currency to actually be paid in foreign currency, and for that payment to be legal under our legislation. Again, modernizing the legislation, bringing it into this, we went into the 21st century quite a while ago, but so far into the 21st century, we are seeking to make sure that our legislation is keeping up with where we are in our national development. In Section 8, Mr. Speaker, there is a provision for deductions, contributions to pension funds, advances, deductions related to other statutory provisions. There is at the end of Section 8, or paragraph 8, the term, or the construction of words, and the employer shall pay the deducted money to the person. We have had, Mr. Speaker, too many situations where money has been deducted from the pay, the wages or the salaries of workers, with the understanding that those deductions were to be passed on to somebody else, either to a credit union, a hire purchase company, a bank, a trade union, the National Insurance Fund, but the National Insurance Scheme more generally. Barbados Revenue Authority, monies have been deducted from employees' pay and not sent on to where they were supposed to go. Let me say to you, Mr. Speaker, that with the passage of this bill and its proclamation, I expect that wickedness to done, to stop, to come to an end. For those who may think that the words that I just raised my voice on are just words, let me point them to section 25(2) of the bill. If those monies are not paid over, the penalty is $30,000 or up to 3 years in DODS. That is to say, in prison. That will be the penalty if those monies deducted are not paid over. So if the $40 that you deducted for union dues not submitted, not handed over, not passed over, then that $40 or $50 can cost you up to $30,000. It can cause you jail time. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that we have to be very serious about making sure that people do the right thing. We are not asking, Mr. Speaker, in this bill for anybody to do any fancy footwork. We are not asking for anything impossible. We are not asking for anything new. We are asking for decency in the operation of your business. We are asking that you do what you said that you would do. When you say you're going to deduct money and pass it over, we expect that when you deduct, you will pass it over. And so we've made sure that we've put in a penalty sufficient that we believe, at least today in 2026, can act as an effective deterrent. We have, Mr. Speaker, maintained in the legislation, Section 7, we see it also at Section 34, paragraph 34, paragraph 43, advances and overpayments. So we talk about, in industrial relations very often, in HR, people development offices, about the 1/3 rule. We've maintained the 1/3 rule. 1/3 rule meaning an employer cannot deduct more than 1/3 of a person's pay. The understanding is that the worker still got to buy some groceries, still got to pay rent, still got to pay water, still got to pay light bills, still got to do other things. That 1/3 rule we have maintained for advances and overpayments. Advances and overpayments. And when I say overpayments, Mr. Speaker, as I went through this bill, as I read overpayments, I could not help but think of a former, now late, but a very blessed memory, shop steward of mine, who, and I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, because as minister responsible for labor and worker protection, I don't expect employers to be perfect all the time. I expect them to be decent. So I'm going to use this example because I once overpaid my workers when I ran a hotel on the South Coast. And when it was brought to my attention by payroll, I told them, well, deduct the overpayment. I mean, you overpaid, deduct the overpayment. The day after payday, the day after the next payday, I was at one of the other hotels in the group, and I got a telephone call that said, Mr. Jordan, the workers on strike, and they said they ain't working till you get here. My favorite trade unionists, I said that deliberately, my favorite trade unionists had called a strike on me. I went to the hotel. All the workers are gathered in the lunchroom. Nobody, as we would say, licking a straw. Nobody working, everybody in the lunchroom. As I walked in, one of the ladies who was on strike told me, don't let them kill me. But she on strike, she ain't working either. We discussed it, and I realized that I had erred. I never said anything. Even before we got to the 1/3, I never indicated to the workers that I had given the instruction to make the deduction. That was bad IR on my part. And I apologized, and everybody went back to work. But maybe it was because I had a decent relationship with the workers. So they made their point, and then they went back to work. We don't expect everybody to get it right all the time. But workers know when your heart is in the right place. They absolutely do. I know that from over 25 years of practicing industrial relations in the private sector. People know. If you have overpaid, do not make the mistake that the Minister of Labor made before he was the minister. Talk to your people. Talk to your workers. In any case, the deduction cannot be more than 1/3 of their gross wages. We have removed, Mr. Speaker, the 1/3 restriction from the assignment of wages. And we have done that for a particular reason. I indicated in my opening that as I reflected on this bill, I thought about those partners, couples, families, who in their own domestic economy have worked out who will pay for what. There used to be a time when if a person after deductions would end up with $40 or $50, we would say, but that person doesn't have enough to live on. We have come to understand that as people arrange their finances, sometimes the mortgage or some significant obligation comes out of a particular payment, a particular person's pay. And that does not necessarily mean that the household is ending up with that amount of money. And so we have left the determination of this with the worker, but we have removed the restriction of assignment. Now, assignment is not for advances, it is not for overpayment. This is when it relates to a hire purchase arrangement or a mortgage arrangement. We have removed the matter of assignment from this legislation, allowing people in a household, people who are related, partners, to be able to properly organize their own domestic finances without the law getting into the way. That is what we have done in this bill. Mr. Speaker, going along with that, it is also necessary for written consent when deductions are to be made, and that is at Section 9. All deductions outside of statutory must be by written consent. Additionally, at Section 10, there is a provision, and this is a provision that continues. I just want to make reference to it because from time to time people forget. No interest is to be charged on salary or when a person comes to you, a worker, and wants an advance meaning in anticipation of receiving a pay at some future time, there is to be no interest charged on those advances. Let me put it a different way. Charging interest on salary advances is illegal. Illegal. Not just immoral, not just unethical, but also illegal. In Section 13, for all those people who have who generate pay slips, not who have, but who generate pay slips, and who purport to have things on those pay slips styled retention under Section 13, that is illegal, or under paragraph 13, when it becomes an act, Section 13 will make those deductions illegal. Illegal to pass on business risk onto a hapless worker. The business risk is a risk that you take when you decide to go into business. We've also added, Mr. Speaker, and this may not seem a big thing, but sometimes a government has to protect people, and so there is in existence a list of places where payment of wages not supposed to take place. We've added to that places of entertainment, places of gambling. We've added places of entertainment and places of gambling. Of course, the legislation understands that if you work in a place where there's gambling, then that is where you're paid. If you work in an entertainment establishment, that is where you're paid. But if you do not, you are not to be paid in a place of gambling or a place of entertainment. Mr. Speaker, a section that is very dear to my heart is the section that deals with bankruptcy of the employer. When an employer becomes insolvent. This bill, Mr. Speaker, will make provision for that worker and that worker's wages to be treated as preferred. And I, Mr. Speaker, wish to share the paragraph with this honorable chamber. It is titled Wages in Case of Bankruptcy or Insolvency. And it says, Mr. Speaker, where an employer A is in receivership and the receiver has realized the assets of the employer and is making a distribution to creditors in accordance with the Companies Act, Cap 308, where an employer who is an insolvent debtor makes a proposal to his employees as creditors, and the proposal is approved by the court in accordance with the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, Cap 303, or where an employer is bankrupt and there is a distribution of the proceeds realized from the estate of the bankrupted employer in accordance with the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, Cap 303, if any of those three are the case, this bill says his employees shall be treated as preferred creditors with respect to any wages that are due to them for any work done by them prior to the filing of an assignment by the employer. This, Mr. Speaker, is a significant addition when we talk about protecting the wages of workers. This is not to say that employers necessarily or deliberately exclude workers from the payout. But we do know that there are certain legal arrangements that sometimes the employer has no authority to go against. And so there are big institutions that step up, don't care about the workers. I want my money because you have signed this. I want my money because of this. We are now giving legal backative to the employer who, in following the law, will recognize that his workers are to be treated as preferred creditors. And he now has, meaning whoever the employer is, man or woman, now has the backing of the law to say, my workers are also preferred creditors. This, Mr. Speaker, is an important inclusion, as I said, and it speaks to a government that understands the nuances of business, that understands the vagaries of life, that understands that from time to time, businesses will go to business, will cease to operate, but that at all times, workers and the wages of workers must be protected. That is the reason for this protection of wages bill, to protect the hard-earned wages and salaries of those who work, who toil in businesses and in organizations every day in this country. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we've also done significant work with respect to addressing people with disabilities. We have, in our work and in our legislation, ensured that everybody knows that we see people with disabilities as human beings first. And that's the reason why we say people with disabilities. The with disabilities is an appendage. There are people first. And we always have to thank the now senior minister responsible for infrastructure, the one who is a social minister in an infrastructure ministry, for really guiding us through the process, and also the former member of Parliament for St. James North. This bill, Mr. Speaker, at section 19, is very clear that when an employer is communicating to an employee with special needs, any notice must be given by a method of communication that readily permits the employee to receive and understand the notice, so that whatever a person with a disability needs with respect to communication, the law mandates that the notice, any notice given under this piece of legislation, must allow that worker to receive the notice and to understand the notice. Again, recognizing, Mr. Speaker, the value that we place on every single worker, including workers who have disabilities or special needs. Mr. Speaker, this bill also will allow for complaints to be made through the Chief Labor Officer to the Employment Rights Tribunal. Previously, addressing matters in the legislation was only through the court. The Employment Rights Tribunal was established because often the court is daunting to workers. Daunting in terms of court location, all that goes on in the court. Daunting also with respect to the cost of retaining counsel, retaining attorneys, whether they're senior counsels or king's counsels, however they're styled, whether they're called to the bar or they're Mackenzie's friends. A lot of people do not want to go to the court. And so this bill makes provision for use of the Employment Rights Act and the Employment Rights Tribunal to hear, to adjudicate, to determine complaints brought before it. And that is at section 20. So a worker now will have the ability, rather than go to court, to go to the Employment Rights Tribunal. And I say here, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for St. Michael West need not start to sweat. I say here, he knows why he said that, he's the Minister of Housing. But I say here that we have established a full-time tribunal. We are hearing cases at a much faster clip than we did before, much faster pace. We are awaiting from the honourable member for St. Michael West, and he's assured me that he is on the matter. We need a home for the tribunal, and that home will come through the ministry responsible for housing. The minister has gotten involved, the honourable member for St. Michael West. He has gotten involved because after I spoke to officers of his ministry here in the Well of Parliament during the estimates, and after his officers in the ministry assured me that work would be done and that the work would commence immediately, I had to report to the honourable member for St. Michael West that work began immediately and it stopped also immediately. So that work happened on the Saturday after that sitting, that we have to be much more activists. I've also said to them, based on an experience that I had when engaging, I have done a number of inspections, not myself, but along with the team from the ministry. And an employer said something to me that made me think that that employer thought that he could buy me. I didn't say bribe, I said buy. I have no doubt, and I'm saying this, I have a reason for saying this publicly. I have no doubt that officers across government, including officers in the Labor Department, will from time to time be approached to look the other way. And I've said to them, this ministry is not about looking the other way. I've said to them they don't have to worry about their minister because I have to fund my election campaigns myself. So I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm not beholden to anybody. They have a job to do. I have a job to do. We have more work that needs to be done. I am not fond of making promises, but I can say that we are working on amendments to the Employment Rights Act. I can also say that we are very advanced in working on some amendments to the Labor Clauses Public Contracts Act. I can also say that with respect to workers in hotel accommodation and tourism accommodation, that I will shortly be establishing new rates of pay and conditions of work for workers in tourism accommodation across the country. The ministry that I have the honor to lead recognizes its responsibility to the workers of the country and to the country more generally. We recognize that if there's to be decent work, then our ministry, its legal department, but also importantly, its inspectorate, have a critical role, maybe even a pivotal role. They, through me, and I, as minister, recommit ourselves to understanding that role and acting in such a way as to make decent work a reality in this country. We commit ourselves to following through on all that we've put in the bill, hopefully to become an act of Parliament and law in Barbados. We recognize that this will be of no avail if it is not backed up by rigorous inspection and strong enforcement, including using all the levers made available. The levers are not just me speaking in Parliament, but it is also the Employment Rights Tribunal, It is also conciliations through the Labor Department, and it is also ultimately the court of law. I commend this bill to this chamber. I commit that we will do all in our power to uphold all the tenets in it from an enforcement, educational first, and enforcement perspective. And Mr. Speaker, the workers of Barbados can continue to be assured, hears them, feels them, and are committed to their welfare, to their well-being, to their production, to their protection, so that they can be productive citizens in this country. I'm obliged to you. Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be read a second time.
Wait a second.
Honourable Member St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I rise to support the bill that is before the House. And as always, it is such a privilege and a pleasure to listen to my good friend, the MP for St. Peter, as he speaks on these most important bills, and perhaps I will say a bit more about that later. Mr. Speaker, sir, I had the privilege to teach social policy, political theory, various things at the university. When I was a student and then a lecturer, I found myself very much consumed with the idea of the state of nature, the different views put forward by Hobbes, by Locke, and Rousseau, which I know you know. At the time when I was a bit younger and a lot more radical than I am now, I found myself very much drawn to the idea that man is born free and everywhere else he is in chains. And that for that reason alone, we had a responsibility to be a little bit more radical in how we approach the world. But at the time, I also found some liking to the idea that Locke put forward, which is the idea that we own our labor. Of course, he was writing in a very different time, and at that time, the labor was in relation to nature and the things that you build, you own. And that perhaps it would not be fair to say that in the 21st century, we can own our labor in the exact same way, but I think the principle of it still exists. That it is unquestionable that you are entitled lawfully to what is agreed upon when you take up a job. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, it's in that vein that I wish to enter into this particular conversation. The idea that fairness and dignity must be associated with a person's labor. Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe it then, I believed it very truly then, and I believe it now, that your labor is perhaps the highest thing you can offer, Mr. Speaker, sir, in a country like Barbados. Because for many of us, labor is all we have. We don't own the factors of production, many of us. Labor is what we are, essentially. And that when we move to protect that labor, we essentially move to protect the dignity of man and mankind. Mr. Speaker, sir. So it is with that in mind that I approach this bill. When I first looked at it, or persons may think that this is a very technical bill, but I wish to offer the position, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this is a bill essentially about human dignity. And that the way it was framed by the Honourable Member for St. Peter emphasizes that it really is a bill about human dignity. At the core of this discussion, Mr. Speaker, sir, at the core of it is the question that must be asked and answered is what value do we place on work itself? And that is the fundamental question I believe that is before this House. What value do we place on work itself? What kind of society do we wish to live in? What kind of world do we wish to have for our children, Mr. Speaker, sir? That is the question that is ultimately before the House. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a time for those of us who follow labor laws and so on, sir. You know, I should say, when I got my first real job, my first job was stuffing pillows at 10 cents a pillow, which was like slave labor. But my first real job was at the VAT office. And within the first month of working there, I joined the union. And not that I intended to be a bad employee, because people feel when you're joining the union, you're doing so to get some kind of protection when you're bad. But I joined it because I believe in the role of the union. The honourable member for St. George North may not be happy with the union I joined, but I joined the union. And at that time, Mr. Speaker, sir, having been a young student all through my life in the public service, when I left the public service, I left as a director, still a member of the union, still dedicated, still encouraging my staff at the time to go and join the union, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I believe that when I look at the history of labor rights, Mr. Speaker, sir, we saw for a long time persons fought for basic things. Persons were fighting for safer conditions. The idea that you could even have collective bargaining was something people had to fight for, Mr. Speaker, sir. For equality in the workplace, people are still fighting for it. Mr. Speaker, sir, every generation has been called, in my view, to strengthen the dignity of work. And I think the question that was asked in this House this morning, what is the value of work, was answered very appropriately by the Honourable Member for St. Peter. Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not know if the country is aware of the amount of work that the Honourable Member for St. Peter has done, and the way he has advanced the rights of the worker in this country as Minister of Labour. In my view, he will go down as the best Minister of Labour this country has ever seen, by far, just by virtue of the amount of legislation he has brought. And I also must say, Mr. Speaker, sir, as he said, that I feel particularly privileged to know that this Labour Party still has in its bosom the leader of the Barbados Workers' Union. Mr. Speaker, sir, a Labour Party is a Labour Party. And I am pleased to have the leader of the Barbados Workers' Union, who I often refer to as the conscience of the party. Many people see, permit me to say very briefly, quickly, just to say Tony Moore, because that's how they know her, Mr. Speaker, but the Honourable Member for St. George North, and think that she is some kind of sweetbread. She's never a sweetbread, even in our private meetings. And it's sweet, but not a sweetbread. And Mr. Speaker, sir, even in our private meetings, we are reminded of the role that we have to protect the average person in this country. I am grateful to the member for St. Peter, and I am grateful to the member for St. George North for the way that they have gone about the business of the average person in Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, sir, most of us are average people. And certainly most of us represent average people. And if we do not recognize that that is the core of our work, then those of us who come to political life, we are in the wrong business. Our role is to represent the average person in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. But our generation, in my view, face a different challenge. There are times, sir, when persons would want to compare you to what was done in the past. I have often said that what pleases me about Barbadian society has never really been what about the things the former leaders did, it's how they thought about the world, how they viewed the world, and the capacity for Barbados to be able to achieve all things if we were privileged enough to exhume the bodies of our former leaders, or to take those of them who are on the seas and bring them back, sir. The things that we are doing now would be as important to them as the things that they did in the past. It's how we think about the world, Mr. Speaker, sir, that I find to be particularly amazing. And this generation, as the world changes before our eyes, technology is changing. It's not the same technology. Mr. Speaker, sir, I see artificial intelligence now doing things that would, for once upon a time, sir, seemed impossible to be able to do. You watch a video, persons put you next to somebody far across the world and it looks just like you. You have to be able to convince somebody that it is not you. Some men are using it now to their advantage and claim it is not them. But Mr. Speaker, sir, artificial intelligence, sir, is allowing the world to do all kinds of strange things. We see now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm a member for St. Peter spoke to it. Payments are now digital. I was in Africa many years ago, and persons were paying for things on the street on their phone. I came back, sir, and M-Pesa. And I came back, sir, and I was talking to the men in the maritime sector about being able to pay for things on their phone, the jet ski operators and so on. They couldn't see it at the time. But we knew that this was happening long before in other places across the world, Mr. Speaker. So it's not that we have come here to abandon the principles that have served the workers well. We came, Mr. Speaker, sir, to recognize that this is a new era and that good legislation should allow us to preserve the dignity the dignity of the worker even in this era, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I believe that this is what this bill has done. You know, Mr. Speaker, sir, for those who are economists, like my good friend, the Minister of Finance, for those of us who are economists, for them, I studied economics, and yourself, sir, but I'm not an economist. But we often hear, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the ideas of land, labor, and capital. They tell you a lot about the value of these three things. And I appreciate it, sir, but labor is different. Land does not have a family. Land does not have to go to the supermarket at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, sir. Buildings don't get up on mornings and dream for their children. Labor is different. And I believe in that context, Mr. Speaker, sir, labor cannot wait. Machines could wait. You could wait for parts and send for parts all over the world. But labor, Mr. Speaker, sir, is different. When you have to go to the supermarket to buy groceries because your children are hungry, Mr. Speaker, sir, you can't wait. When you have to go and pay your bills, I remember during COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had a constituent who was still working, but her pay was delayed, and her internet got cut off. Now, during COVID, the internet represented a different thing because the internet was school for her child, Mr. Speaker, sir. And because she could not pay the internet bill because her salary was late, her child could not get an education. That is the reality of labor. And when I say that we have to be able to protect people's wages, I don't only mean the quantum, the quantity of it. I mean the time in which persons are paid, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that is what fairness is about, and I believe that is what this bill allows us to do. That is why I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, labor deserves special treatment in legislation. And that this country will forever owe a debt to the Honourable Member for St. Peter for the kind of legislation that he has brought to this House. Mr. Speaker, sir, every person's labor tells a story, Mr. Speaker. You have men and women who define themselves in relation to their job. In fact, persons of all standings in life define themselves by their job. You are introduced to a person, and the second thing they tell you is that I'm a doctor, or I'm a lawyer, or they're the Indian chief. They introduce themselves by virtue of their job. They tie so closely who they are, their identity, their role. Mr. Speaker, sir, labor matters. I have constituents, sir, who are very proud to be able to say that they work X amount of hours to be able to feed their children. But that's just not taught. People say I'm doing this to be able to feed my children, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if we protect the capacity of people to be able to do that, then we protect the dignity of this country. And that is how I view this bill. That is why I began by saying that this bill is essentially about the dignity of the worker. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I also feel that this bill is about time. As I get older, I come to appreciate a lot more, like closer to my heart, my time. And how important time really is, Mr. Speaker, sir. As I get older, I come to appreciate, sir, that a moment passed, the Honourable Member for St. James South is smiling at me. But as I get older, Mr. Speaker, sir, I come to realize that once you put in your you can't get it back. When you go wasting time, Mr. Speaker, sir, you cannot get it. I know why she's smiling. When you go wasting your time, sir, you cannot get it back because time is so precious a commodity, Mr. Speaker, sir. And think about it. You spend hours, if you're a bus driver, driving the bus. If you are a conductress, at the time as my mom was, conducting on the bus. If you are a server in a restaurant, you spend your time serving in the restaurant. Mr. Speaker, sir, time is the most precious commodity that any of us have, by far. And you know how you know? When you're running out of it. As I watched one of my best friends recently, sir, as he transitioned, sir, time is the most important commodity that we have. And when you take a worker, after they have given you their time, after you have agreed to reward them for their time at a particular rate and to pay them at a particular time, hopefully in a fashion that they have agreed, and you change it, you disrespect their time. You then therefore disrespect who they are, and you disrespect the principle of human civilization. This is a serious piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir. I read this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, and my mind went to all of the people, sir, for whom Locke also said, you know, the reason that you need to have a government is to protect the rights and the liberty and the truth and justice for people. And that is why I believe that we happen to be the government at this time, to be able to protect the rights of people, Mr. Speaker, sir, and their liberty. So I believe, sir, that this bill is really about being able to have a society that is stronger than the one we came and found, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also feel that this bill allows us to face a modern Barbados with some sense of pride. We know, for example, Mr. Speaker, sir, that good legislation should allow us to keep pace with the times in which we live. When I had a responsibility for the Ministry of Social Policy, Social Care, sir, I came and I found child protection legislation that was 120 years old, that was still governing Barbados. Most of the bills in the social services sector, Mr. Speaker, so most of the acts, were at least 50 years old. The one bill that governed most of it was from 1965. It is not hard for us to be able to appreciate that those bills, those acts, Mr. Speaker, sir, cannot be entirely relevant in a modern Barbados. And I feel that we have to come here to modernize the legislation, to keep pace with the society. A good law must endure, but it must also evolve. My view, that yes, you can have a bill that you enact, but there has to be times when you have to go back and change it. The problem with Barbadian society, and not only for our legislation, is that sometimes we do a good thing in its time, but we become so loyal to it that even as the times have changed, our commitment is to the thing we did many years ago. And we do not recognize that the world has changed, the society has changed, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have a responsibility to come to this House and bring modern legislation. And that is what the Honourable Member for St. Peter has done in the form of this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir. 2026 is not 1951. It cannot be. It is not even 1975, I think, when the bill was amended. This is a completely different time, Mr. Speaker, sir. And therefore, that is why I think it is important. If you think that we have the same economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, if anyone thinks so, they are wrong. We think that we have the same society, they are wrong. If they think that we have the same technology, they are wrong. The society has changed, and therefore our legislation must change to be able to keep pace with it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I believe that this bill that is before the House allows us to do that, Mr. Speaker, sir. You know, during COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, I find myself reflecting on COVID. I do not think Barbados has fully come to terms with the impact COVID has had on this country. I also feel that if we have not learned from the lessons of COVID, then perhaps we will never learn. If you do not recognize how precious and fragile labor is, if COVID did not teach us that, Mr. Speaker, sir, then we will never learn, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have to come now and be able to make things faster for people. When I tried, Mr. Speaker, sir, at the time to be able to give pensions through wire transfers and to lodge it onto people's bank accounts, there were people who were so deliberately naughty as to suggest that the government is now somehow trying to hold on to people's pensions. During COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, I appreciate that older people like to gather at the market, they like to gather at the post office. But we also know that older persons were the most likely to die from COVID. We then sought to create a way to be able to put people's money straight onto their bank accounts so that they can have access to it. Hopefully, sir, we also put in place a trusted friend program where we were working with them to help persons access their money. I know that there are persons who are deliberately naughty, politically motivated and deliberately naughty, who will see us trying to be able to allow digital payments and suggest that there is something nefarious in our decision so to do, as they did, sir, with the elderly persons bill that we passed, Mr. Speaker, sir. But this bill recognizes direct deposits. I think that this is so important. These are not admin amendments, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is about justice. This is about allowing people to be able to do, you know, once upon a time there were, in this country, some would say even now, two classes of people. One man who got barrel, he used to call it a wad. He wad a big, thick amount of cash. And the real people with means pull out their card. And you feel that you got big money because you pull out you big bill full. And the other man pull out he ATM card. Well, some of y'all got black ones. Some of y'all have gold ones. Some of us, like myself, have regular ones. But Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a time when people would feel like, you have to have this money walking around. So these are dangerous times. I saw a youngster in the U.S., sir. He had his graduation. He posted on social media. I don't know if you all saw it. A whole set of cash. He going out to his graduation with a whole set of cash, and they killed him in the night time for it. Mr. Speaker, sir. So we live in different times. I believe that this is about safety. It is also about dignity. I listened to the Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, sir, saying that persons, banks, if a man chooses this bank or a woman chooses this bank, then they have to go to the bank that they choose. And they can't penalize them for doing so, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is fairness. This is what this is. This is about being fair, Mr. Speaker, sir. And technology should allow us to be able to do that. Technology should make it easier to pay workers, but it should not make it easier to deny them their rights. And that there's some people who would want to use technology to deny people their rights. Say, you can't get your money on this particular bank account. You got a bank with the bank that I send you to. Call people as children. You got to go to this bank. I send you to this bank like a child. And this is the only time you can get paid. If you want to get paid, you got to go to this bank. And Mr. Speaker said these are things that are happening in this country. So the bill has not been drawn out of space. It is built on the realities of day-to-day experiences of ordinary people in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. I listened to every word the minister had to say, Mr. Speaker, sir. He dealt with that particular category very impressively, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that is why I do not believe that this is just admin arrangements. This is just not a philosophical exposition, that this is real life, Mr. Speaker, sir. I like that it empowers the worker, Mr. Speaker, sir. I, like you, sir, I'm a social scientist. At the core of human development, sir, if anyone studies human development, the core of human development is freedom. The capacity to be able to choose any definition of human development. Does the person have freedom to choose? If you live in a country, Mr. Speaker, sir, to what extent could you make a different choice? To what extent could I choose not to eat this today, but I can eat that tomorrow? To what extent can I choose not to take the bus because I know I could get another form of transportation? What is the freedoms that this bill allows, Mr. Speaker, sir? And I like that this bill allows the employee certain freedom because it recognizes that the wages, though paid by the employer, are owned by the employee. And because my wages are mine, I get to tell you how I want my money. And I get to tell you that I don't want my money in bare coins. I get to tell you under this bill now that you can't pay me any more than $10 in coins. And the fact that we have to come and legislate that, tells us something desperately sad about the country we live in when it comes to certain employers, Mr. Speaker, sir. I must tell you, and I must tell anybody who does business with my ministry, that I have no business dealing with people who are trying to unfair people in this country, period. I have no business dealing with anybody whose record when it comes to labor laws and labor rights and human rights, Mr. Speaker, sir, is such that it brings me sadness. I have to represent the poor people that I know, Mr. Speaker, sir, the household that I grew up in. I have to represent the people in Britain's Hill and Bayland, Dalkeith, Darrells Road, sir. I'm sure you want me to be able, you're no longer for that area, sir, but I'm sure all of the persons out your area would want to hear that this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir, is standing up for them. This bill allows us to be able to stand up for them, Mr. Speaker, sir. Economic freedom is as much a freedom as any other human freedom. The freedom for me to tell you how I want to be paid, Mr. Speaker, sir. You do not get to make private financial choices with what is mine. You don't get to do it. Because if I argue, as I am arguing in the context of this debate, that I essentially own my labor, and that what I produce is essentially mine, not in the same way Locke envisioned it, but to suggest that the rewards of it are mine, then I get to tell you how I want my money, big man, as the young people would say. You don't get to treat me like a child. And Mr. Speaker, sir, imagine you work a whole day. You work a whole week, and then at the end of the week, your employer telling you all kinds of things about your money. Because it is by now, it is yours. If you work for it, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is yours. I also like that the bill recognizes that Barbados is an international economy. The honourable member spoke to this, so I don't need to go over it. But if people want to be able to be paid in foreign currency, Mr. Speaker, sir, Barbados is an international economy. We have people who come here to work, Mr. Speaker, sir, who have made Barbados their home, who spend in our supermarkets, Mr. Speaker, sir, who do all kinds of things. And we say to them, Mr. Speaker, sir, you are welcome here. That is what Barbados is. We also have many Barbadians who work in other places. Bajans sometimes forget that. There's hardly a place that I have gone on this goodly, God's green earth and haven't met a Bajan. And in most of those places, not only have I met Bajans, I've met Barbadians doing amazing things. You walking down the street, you in the supermarket, or as some Bajans would be in the store, trying to buy a pair of socks or something, and you could hear, man, like them there, so you hear a very strong Bajan accent coming through. Bajans are all over the world, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we live in an international economy. There's nothing wrong with protecting Barbados' reputation by allowing other persons to be able to work. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the part of this bill that I perhaps like the most is the part that deals with inclusion. I have had the privilege to lead in this parliament, sir, the bill that brought rights to persons with disabilities. I believe that every piece of legislation that we bring to this House should recognize persons with disabilities, sir, and allow that level of inclusion so that the dignity that this bill assigns to the average Barbadian is not denied to persons with disabilities. And again, we have to be explicit in it, because you would suggest something in the law, or you might have a suggestion in a conversation, and people deliberately leave it out. So I like that this bill provides. It says, I think that, in my own words, that persons with disabilities receive notices in a form that they can readily receive and understand. And that is so important, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because, you know, my mother used to say to me, if I call for her and she don't answer me, then we ain't had no conversation. Or if I shout again outside, but she didn't respond, she never gave me permission to go outside. Because at the end of the day, sir, if you don't understand it, you just talking. And people would like to say, but I say so. What's the point in saying so if the person can't hear? You understand, Mr. Speaker? So we have to be able to put these bills in a way that the average person can understand, but the accessibility that is built into this bill is not charity. Like any other worker, if you have worked, sir, it is yours. It is your right, Mr. Speaker, sir, and this bill allows us to be able to recognize it as much as that, sir. We must prepare for tomorrow. Work has changed. Technology has changed, sir, and we have to change with it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I always, as I did a few minutes ago, I always ask myself, if we were to bring back the greatest, Errol Barrow and Tom Adams and them, and we put them now in the chair, Mr. Speaker, sir, skilled as they are, it would take them a long time to come to terms with Barbadian society. The world has changed. The world has changed so much. But I believe the greatest homage that we can pay to the leaders of the past is not to dwell on the things that they did, sir, but to build on the things that they did. And I thank the honourable member for St. Peter for bringing a bill that allows us to build on the work that was done, sir, by those in the past, Mr. Speaker, sir. You know, Locke reminded us that people own their labor. In a modern workforce, sir, people own their labor. The way I see it, the employer is purchasing that labor from you. You offer your services, sir, they pay you for it, they're purchasing your labor. But they do not get to make any decisions about it after that. We come to terms in the workforce, I got to get to work for 8, I get to work for 8. You ask me to have an hour lunch, I take an hour lunch. I do the things that we agree upon, Mr. Speaker, sir, but after that, you owe me. And you are to pay me. And you are to pay me on time. And the idea is, sir, that you have to deduct my wages according to how you and I come to terms. The honourable member for St. Peter, in his come to Jesus moment, when he was at that time an accountant, when he said he confessed that he took out the wages and then he was man enough to go and apologize, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is who he is. And, you know, the Honourable Member St. Peter, when I listen to him speak, he's one of the most decent human beings that I know. And I know when he brings a bill before this House, that those are not just words from his mouth, but that is really the manifestation of his heart. Because I know him as a very good man, Mr. Speaker, sir. But not everybody, like the Honourable Member for St. Peter. There's some people who you got to go and protest and beg and plead and plead. You know, you give a worker an overpay. Most people don't even know if they get overpay. A man just be so happy to see a little money on the account. Or if you owe people and you put too much money on my account, but if I owe the bank $600 and I only got $200, the bank will only take $200. But if I owe the bank $600 and you put $600 on my account, the bank can take it all and then tell me in the next month that I got to pay back you and the bank too. But Mr. Speaker, sir, it's not the worker's fault. And so this idea that you're going to do deductions is fine, it is fair, but that you have to come to terms with some way or you're going to be able to do these deductions. You take out $1,000 1 month out of a man's salary. Mr. Speaker, how are they going to live? How are they going to eat? Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill is really essentially about fairness. If you want to do it, let's come to terms. The bill requires some consent, Mr. Speaker, sir. Most employers and employees will be best suited if the organizations built trust, if the organizations had fairness and transparency. You know, most of the problems that we have in organizations, Mr. Speaker, sir, is because people don't trust their employers. And in some cases, the employers don't trust the employees. So you have a relationship that is essentially built on tensions. And you have this very tense relationship, sir, that a person's only staying there because most people tell you, I only go work because I want the money. But there's some places where people go to work because they say, I love my job. I like working at this place. My employer is fair. My bosses treat me good, Mr. Speaker, sir. Those are the things that we need to be able to aspire to. Because then you would not only get productivity in your workplace, but you would get good industrial relations in your workplace, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I believe that that should be the point. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also read in this bill that there are provisions for the employer. The bill talks a lot about fairness in a way because good labor legislation is not anti-business legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir. The bill allows for fairness, Mr. Speaker, sir. It allows certainty. When I managed the maritime sector, Mr. Speaker, sir, the persons who were doing business with the port, who owns the large ships, they said for them the most important thing was certainty. Let us agree on these terms, and we are going to abide by these terms. Where there is no kind of guidelines, no signposts to allow people to navigate where they are going, it allows for all kinds of confusion. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill allows certainty. It recognizes that an employer could pay by mistake. Sometimes he could overpay. The bill allows that, Mr. Speaker, sir. It allows the overpayments to be managed through a lawful process. And therefore, because of that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I say that the bill provides clarity. I also like that it provides protection for employees during insolvency, Mr. Speaker, sir. If it is, I don't know how many members of this House have had the indecent experience of having to go without a salary through no fault of yours. If a company has been badly managed or some other variable that forces the company to be in a position not to be able to pay you, what life is like after that, Mr. Speaker? Or if it is, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I came to experience in 93, 94, just before the government change, when everybody got sent home from the transport board and you had to live on savings. Mr. Speaker, sir, this may be shocking, but poor people ain't got no savings. People tell you things that are so indecent and inhumane. You should have saved 3 months' salary. How do you save 3 months' salary when you got 8 children to feed? Mr. Speaker, sir, you should have made plans for this. How can I make plans for your terminating me? How could I make plans for your badly run business that has gone insolvent or for some other reason? It becomes the burden of the employee, Mr. Speaker, sir. It should never be so. And I like that this bill protects the employee in those circumstances, sir. It is a very, very difficult thing. I saw a social worker come to my house and tell my mother, you can't want nothing because you got a nice TV. You got a whatnot. That is called the what's not thing. You know what I mean? Y'all remember for St. Michael Southeast knows well. A little whatnot with enough for them little things, ornaments. My mother used to treasure those things so much. When the social worker came, she started counting them. Look how much things you got in your house, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I don't know, but when you broke those things and you're fighting for your mother, you got to go and get Evac milk at the time and put the two of them back together. Evac milk used to hold them. You got to make sure that you don't break none of them things because people value the things that they had. But when you come now, you make a determination on whether I can or cannot access social services because I own ornaments, Mr. Speaker, sir, or because I should have had savings. What savings, Mr. Speaker, sir? I encourage people to save where they can, but I know that a good piece of modern legislation would allow us to protect persons in those particular circumstances, Mr. Speaker, sir. And the Honourable Member for St. Peter spoke to the government leading by example. That is what a good government does, Mr. Speaker, sir. I like the provisions that bind this government because we must be consistent in the things that we say we are doing and the things that we actually do, Mr. Speaker, sir. I was in taxes, and I know one of the things that offend people who work with VAT office or income tax is that the month when your tax is payable, the day after, you got to pay interest. But the government in the VAT legislation allows itself 6 months. In some cases, the government don't take no interest. You can't get no interest of the government at all. But I know in this particular bill, we bind the government. You have to abide by certain rules too. And people in this time want fairness. You know, when you go on social media, the first thing people say, one of politicians this and one of politicians that. Sir, this bill binds the government. And I think that is something that we should be able to speak of, Mr. Speaker, sir. I had already said, Mr. Speaker, sir, about productivity. I will not go over it, Mr. Speaker, sir. But I believe that we can be a lot more productive if we build proper working relationships, Mr. Speaker, sir. So ultimately, I see this bill, Mr. Speaker, as saying something about the country that we have built and something about the country that we hope to build. I see this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, in much ways, sir, as like a moral compass, directing us, sir, along the path that we now must trod, to be able to protect ordinary men, sir, and women, Mr. Speaker, sir. I see it embedded in the principle of justice and fairness, and as I began, Mr. Speaker, sir, in dignity. I see that, sir, both from a practical point of view and a philosophical point of view. But it's practical. There are practical things in this bill. I said the Honourable Member for St. Peter and his team, and I want to thank the persons who work with the Honourable Member who allowed us to be here. But they did not pull these things from the sky. These are practical solutions, sir. So I say to Barbadians, yes, economic development is about roads, and you know I keep hearing about roads. I can't go in the supermarket. I don't know how the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East did it. I can barely go to the supermarket unless I get a very long queue and request to repair roads. I see the Honourable Member for St. Thomas looking at me already because he's guilty not allowing me to go anywhere unless he wants to talk about roads. But Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, it's about roads. It's about technology. And it is about our port. I used to be minister responsible for the port. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I used to say when I was canvassing that the most important P is not the P in GDP or PPP or any of those Ps. It is about people. And this legislation, sir, is people-centered. It allows us to build a nation, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is fair, that allows ordinary people to say that this government that they elected is working on their behalf, Mr. Speaker, sir. It allows us to say, in the words of law, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is about fairness and that this is about justice and that a government has to be able to protect the rights and dignity of people, Mr. Speaker, sir. This Parliament cannot assign a value to labor. That is true. We cannot assign a value to what it feels to be able to get up and go and even clean anybody's bathroom, Mr. Speaker, sir. Labor in itself carries its own value. It carries an intrinsic value, and that no employer should be allowed to depreciate that value regardless of what the labor is, Mr. Speaker, sir. So as I wrap up, I see you nodding and pointing to the time.
Oh, you did?
Hey, of course I did. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would never ignore you.
Very observant.
I know you would never allow me to ignore you.
You're observant.
Mr. Speaker, sir, what Parliament can do, however, is protect labor. And I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Peter for this legislation that is before this House. I want to thank the member for St. George North for laboring in the vineyards to be able to allow us to get to this position too. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to thank the team that has worked on this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir. Fairness, justice, dignity. That is what is embedded in this bill, sir, and I wholeheartedly support the Protection of Wages Bill 2026. With those few words, sir, I'm honored. Thank you.
Honourable Member St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, along with my other colleagues, to add to this debate and to place on record my professional position on the Protection of Wages Bill 2026, a bill which we have heard from the Honourable Member for St. Peter aims to modernize a framework that has been largely untouched since 1951 and to bring Barbados closer to the international labor standards, particularly ILO Convention 95 on the protection of wages and ILO Convention 173 on the protection of workers' claims in the event of insolvency. But as with all labor legislation, Mr. Speaker, the test is not simply whether legislation is modern. The test is whether it protects workers in real and practical ways and whether there is effective enforcement. It may come as a surprise to some, Mr. Speaker, that I have no intention to make reference to any company or any group of companies that, wearing another hat, I've had to speak to in the last few days. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, I am very satisfied that that matter is now in the hands of the authorities to bring the full weight of the law on that group of companies and any others who offend similarly. But, Mr. Speaker, suffice it to say that we remain watchful, not given to theatrics, as some may suggest, regrettably, mainly old, tired men whose worn-out reflexes and cultures of impunity have targeted this first female leader of the Barbados Workers Union over time at every turn for everything that it was okay for men who previously occupied the position to do. But, Mr. Speaker, we remain watchful. We remain watchful to ensure that the pressure that has been brought to bear, that it unlocks compliance and it creates avenues to correct power imbalances when private engagements and where private engagements have failed. Of course, there are some fly-by-night organizations as well that won't get that. But the Barbados Workers Union, that I am as proud to associate with as I am with this Parliament, continues to know how and when to play. And we continue to know and be able to make the best of the distinction as we march towards 85. A debate of this bill, Mr. Speaker, must reveal that its fundamental purpose is intrinsically linked to ensuring that the worker has a decent standard of living. Implicitly, this bill therefore relies in the first place on the concept that wages must be adequate in the first place, laying a foundation for a decent standard of living. If you talk about the protection of wages and wages aren't good in the first place, it almost begs the question, what are you protecting? So we strive to make sure that wages in this country are decent, and we strive to ensure that there's a mechanism to protect wages towards guaranteeing a decent standard of living for workers in this country and for their families. I wish, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge that a number of amendments reflected in the bill that we have before us are amendments that were proposed and supported by the organization I lead. I am happy, therefore, to report that at Section 3.8, the bill has been amended so that when an employer changes the method of wage payment, the change must be imposed at no cost to the worker. And the honorable member for St. Peter, the honorable colleague who just spoke, reflected on this. In other words, the bill now reflects that the employer shall ensure that the change is at no cost to the employee and does not impose a burden to the employee. This protects workers. This protects workers from being forced into banking arrangements that we have seen over time that cost them, as the honorable members have said, cost them their wages, cost them their time, and so on. I also reflect on Section B, a recommendation that was made for the tightening of the language to ensure that wages are paid on time on a normal working day and no later than the established pay date. And why is that important, Mr. Speaker? Because we have had employers that would force the payment of wages into the weekend when banks are closed. And a worker who has given up their labor for an entire week has to wait through Saturday, Sunday, not being able to put the food on the table, and has to wait until Monday, and has to turn around and beg for time to go and get money because the banking system, the banks close during regular working hours. So this closes loopholes that previously allowed employers to push those payments into weekends or even public holidays, where it becomes even more egregious, effectively delaying a worker's access to wages after she has given up their labor. Mr. Speaker, these accepted amendments strengthen the bill and reflect, in my view, this government's commitment to practical protections. Mr. Speaker, we also welcome the fact that the bill before us, which we hope will soon be enacted, permits employers to make deductions for things like credit union payments, insurance, or loan repayments once there is a written assignment by the worker. Increasingly, we have been finding that employers have been complaining about the administrative burden associated with making these deductions and have been refusing, though, to grant workers the request that is often made for these deductions. And I want to suggest that where this is done, it creates hardship. It creates hardship for those workers who cannot access mortgages unless their employer agrees that they will make the deduction. It creates hardship for workers who cannot maintain credit union commitments or insurance commitments because sometimes the employer who has started to make the deductions decides somewhere midstream that they're no longer doing it. And workers are being pushed into financial instability, therefore, through no fault of their own. This amendment or this change that we see reflected in the bill before us, therefore must be understood for what it is, a matter of financial inclusion and worker dignity. But, Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention, as it should come as no surprise to the Honourable Member for St. Peter, to those areas where some of the recommendations were not taken on board. And I would even like to say have not yet been taken on board. These, Mr. Speaker, in my view, are not minor issues. They go to the heart of fairness and predictability and worker security. I turn our attention to Section 14, recovery of overpayments. The bill allows employers to recover overpaid wages from any future wages, but it does not impose a time limit. So as it is written, what that suggests to me, and I'm not a lawyer, I wouldn't even say thankfully, but this means that an employer could recover an overpayment 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, or 15 years later. As one who functions as a worker representative and who also functions as an agent of the employer, I find this to be unreasonable because workers plan their lives around wages, and they should not be expected to absorb a deduction that happened years and years and years before, especially when an employer's own payroll system may have caused the error. As the Honourable Member for St. Peter pointed to us in his very jarring illustration of workers who opposed him after his action that was done without communication. And very often, we take workers for granted. We take people for granted. We take human nature for granted. And we don't understand that sometimes all people need is a little conversation. He learned that. And many more need to. But I was speaking about payroll errors. Mr. Speaker, as I speak about these, I think about those who were formerly employed by Berger Paints, who have not yet received their final payments for this reason. Because when their calculations were brought to their representative, their labor representative, immediately we saw some inconsistencies that suggested that the calculations could not be accurate. And indeed, for over 4 weeks now, since the final agreement was reached as to how payments should be made, these workers are still waiting for their final settlement because the NISSS and the Labor Department had to be engaged very meticulously in going over systems that unravel payroll errors, to the extent that in trying to ensure workers their due, these workers have not yet been settled. And while it's a good thing on the one hand to make sure that they get the correct payments made, it begs the question, how many workers have been underpaid on account of these payroll systems while the company was fully functioning in Barbados? Mr. Speaker, I therefore suggest that a fairer approach would be to have a clear statutory time frame for the recovery of funds. The suggestion could be 12 months. It could be 6 months. But a time frame nonetheless, because in leaving it open-ended, it means that an employer can come back at any point in time and impose deductions for overpayments. This was not accepted, but Mr. Speaker, I sincerely am of the view that it needs to be revisited. Without a time limit, the clause creates uncertainty and exposes workers to financial shocks, sometimes long after a relationship has changed as well, an employment relationship. I turn our attention to section 18, payment upon termination. This is another area where I have some concern. The bill requires wages to be paid by the next pay period after termination. But, Mr. Speaker, it is still my view that this is not sufficient, especially in cases of summary dismissal or immediate termination. Because in those cases, I believe that payment should be made when the NIS termination certificate is issued, unless otherwise agreed between the employer and the employee. At that point, I believe that it is important, if a relationship is ended, to be clean in these matters and not to have payments pending. Likewise, I appreciate that systems, payroll systems, may not allow for certain things. But in my experience, Mr. Speaker, there are cases where you can do things manually. There are cases where you can override the system to allow for what I believe is immediate justice to be met. You don't want me no more, you're firing me, pay me everything and let me go on about my business one time and done. Workers should not have to wait. So this recommendation is another one that was not accepted, and it is my view that it remains essential for correction. Section 29 on agreements of cooperation was carried over from the old Act. And like in the old Act, it will be problematic under this new legislation because it excludes persons working on the agreements of cooperation from the protections of the Act. In today's labor market, this can be abused if and where, as there is misclassification of workers in informal arrangements and in gig-type arrangements. Mr. Speaker, if a person is performing work under direction for remuneration, they should not be excluded from protection through the use of vague terminology. And it is regrettable that this was not clarified and addressed in the bill before us. Mr. Speaker, I also remain concerned that while we have sought to make some amendments to the Employment Rights Act, for instance, to broaden who may bring a complaint to include the Chief Labor Officer, and I did say we welcome it and see it as positive, I remain concerned, and I must say it, Honourable Member for St. Peter, that we seem to have a little piece-by-piece approach to fixing the Employment Rights Act, when there are so many amendments proposed before us for adjustment to what is perhaps the most fundamental piece of labor protective legislation that provides the basis for all other pieces of labor legislation. For instance, the Employment Rights Act allows the tribunal to set its own rules, and we may well recall how this became problematic because there was one case in which the chairman adopted Supreme Court rules, making a process that was supposed to offer workers a more seamless avenue towards justice more litigious. But to this day, we do not have clear, consistent tribunal rules, and this continues to lead to inconsistent expectations. It continues to lead to inconsistent procedures, and it continues to lead to different requirements depending on which panel you come before. This must be addressed. Workers deserve predictability. Another issue relates to basic award. We have been saying that this must be expanded to include loss of wages, pecuniary damages, exemplary damages, and costs. These, sir, as you well know, are available in the High Court. Workers should not have to access remedies only if they go to the court, but because they take the route of the tribunal, they can access these. especially in cases where it is clear and where it has been established that their rights have been undermined. Then, sir, there's still the confusion with wrongful dismissal against unfair dismissal. There's still the confusion with enforcement of awards because the tribunal directs workers to the magistrate's court, but the magistrate's court does not manage an award above $10,000. So all of these are inconsistencies that inasmuch as we discuss protection of wages and a number of other pieces of legislation, if we don't fix these while the grass is growing, the horse will continue to starve. Representation. Companies are increasingly arguing that, okay, a trade union can represent you, but only one person can enter the room. Now, trade union is not a person, unless it is a trade union posing to be a trade union. A trade union is an organization. And certainly, you will have in a formal structure membership engagement people, grievance people, you will have the negotiator, you will have your legal officer. So you will have a team. And there are too many companies that under the Employment Rights Act, and because the amendments have not been addressed, are not allowing for more persons. Sometimes they do it to attorneys too, you know, sir. So only one attorney can come in the room.
Certain attorneys?
Certain attorneys that will allow it to happen. Those attorneys that might be green enough to allow it to happen. So I'm just saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Act must be amended to clarify these things if we are to breathe life into the other protections that we are seeking to establish. But it's not only in the Employment Rights Act, and I'm talking about the linkages, so it's a connect. It is also with the Minimum Wages Act and the Minimum Wage Order. Right now, Mr. Speaker, you will recall I said at the beginning that this Protection of Wages Act, intrinsically, it depends on other pieces to give it effect, because you protect that which you want to preserve, which is good. So as it relates to the minimum wage, there is a company right now. I won't call the company's name, but the acronym is BEC, and I don't refer to the Barbados Employers Confederation. So if you know it, you know it. But with that company, there is a glaring and jarring misinterpretation of the minimum wages legislation, because that company seeks to impose commissions as part of the minimum wage. In other words, the minimum wage is $10.71, and that company is saying it's okay for us to pay a basic wage of $9, and the rest of it is made up by commissions. Now, clearly, when we look at Section 8.2 of the Minimum Wages Act, it is clear to anyone that that was not the interpretation, or could not be the interpretation by the letter of the law or the spirit. The spirit of a minimum wage is to establish the basic, that wage against which a person can go to a credit union or a bank and borrow. If the basic wage component is only $9, it means that effectively you have undermined the minimum wage by saying to the bank and saying to that worker that your mortgage, your loan, can only be based on what we can guarantee, which is $9. So these are things, and that is before the Labor Department right now, and has been before the Labor Department for almost a year. And these are things that we need to close on. Again, I said it's not theatrics, Mr. Speaker, but when you try to deal with these things behind closed doors and you can't make progress, it is only a matter of time before things go spill out, and you have to use other avenues available to get redress to the problems. Mr. Speaker, effective enforcement requires that we do not allow matters to drag. We are familiar with the saying, justice delayed is justice denied. So I hope that in the same way that there's urgency now to make sure that barracks get licensed and health and safety conditions get cleaned up and so on, that a matter like this will also get some attention. Mr. Speaker, moving on though, as it relates to digital currency and access, I appreciate the modernization of the bill, including such things as digital currency. And I will only say this, that we must ensure that we don't move too far ahead with digital wage payments ahead of people who don't understand it. And on this note, I speak not about enforcement, but I speak about education, making sure that people are brought along. Even recently, we have introduced BIMPay, and there are a lot of people, especially older people, that are saying, not me, but unable for nobody to steal my money, something that is supposed to make life easier because people don't understand it. People will suspect it, and we can't blame them when they suspect it, because what you don't know, and what you don't know causes confusion. So we must ensure that the Labor Department is adequately staffed and adequately resourced, and I make the distinction between staffing and resourcing, because headcount is not the same thing as resourcing. Because if you have enough people and they're not able to deliver, no indictment on who is here, of course, but making the point, we must have the adequate resources to ensure that there's the education that's needed for these laws to make sense to the public, whether you're an employer or employee, and that there is enforcement of the pieces of legislation. I'm not going to say anything about any of the recent recruits. I wish them well, but some of them I happen to know, and I will leave that discussion for another time and another place. Mr. Speaker, so I close on a note of education and awareness. Workers must be educated on their rights under this new act. Employers must be educated on their obligations under this new act. Without education, it is my belief, but more so my experience, that rights remain theoretical and enforcement becomes a chase rather than a reality. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, my presentation suggests that the Protection of Wages Bill, though a significant step forward, is not perfect, and it is therefore not complete. We must continue to refine it. We must continue to do so urgently. We must make urgent and active steps to update the Employment Rights Act, which, as I said, is the act that will ensure workers have access to all these other protections that we are establishing in a manner that is fair, in a manner that is timely, and in a manner that is enforceable. Mr. Speaker, I therefore commit, as long as the Almighty lends me breath, whether here or whether as the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, to add in my voice to strengthen this and other pieces of labor legislation wherever the occasion arises. And for those who know me, and for those who don't yet understand me, I will do so relentlessly until it is heard, because I have committed in this service, because I believe that working people and their families deserve no less. So our advocacy in an organization that is twinned to the party in government, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter represented so clearly for us, Our advocacy in the 85 years of existence almost will not go away. And I imagine, therefore, that we will be back here in very short order on this particular piece of legislation, the protection of wages legislation, and definitely it will not take another 50 years. I don't even think it will take another 50 months. I'm hopeful, and I will do my best to ensure it doesn't take another 50 weeks before we see amendments to this legislation. Because like my colleague who spoke just before me, labor legislation or pieces of legislation must be dynamic for the times. And if we pass a piece today and it's still not good enough, we don't expect perfection, so we will not stop it. But what we expect is that we will continue to work at it, to improve on it, to make sure it delivers in very practical ways to the people on whose behalf all of us in here commit to serve. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 3 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 3 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, yes, have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m.